Hello and welcome to today's lecture. Today we're going to be speaking about a new topic completely. We finished speaking about most of the fundamentals of Judaism, the core concepts which other fundamentals are actually built on, and eventually more detailed ideas in Judaism built on. We might touch on a few other fundamentals which we haven't spoken about yet, but I think we've covered most of the very key fundamentals. So you've got a good foundation of understanding Judaism and the Jewish way of looking at the world and creation and its purpose. So today we're going to speak more about certain prophecies, you could say, which we find in the Torah, the TaNaCh. The TaNaCh is the what's also referred to as the Old Testament, but obviously in the original Hebrew. The TaNaCh is stands for, it's a mnemonic standing for Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim. Torah is the 5 books of the Torah, Nevi'im is the prophets, and Kesuvim is the writings, the scriptures, like Psalms, Proverbs, all the way to Chronicles, Daniel, Ezra. So we have the TaNaCh, Torah, Nevi'im, Kesuvim. And we also have the oral law, which has been written down, started 2,000 years ago, the writing down of the oral Torah, which was, until then, it was given over, obviously orally, verbally, from generation to generation, from father to son, teacher to pupil, and the whole transmission process happened like that. And then the time of the Romans, where there's a lot of persecution, it was much harder to keep that going consistently. So the main points started to be written down, and eventually even that wasn't good enough. So the more detailed points and discussions were written down. That's the Talmud, written about 1,700 years ago, 1,600 years ago, approximately. And then eventually you've got the commentaries. Now, within those two aspects of the Torah, the written Torah, which is the TaNaCh, and the oral one, we have some prophecies. Prophecies which we're going to be looking at are the ones which are happening now. The fulfillment of the prophecies seem to be happening now, and the ones which are going to be fulfilled, the ones which still haven't been fulfilled, the ones for the end of time. So the idea is that according to the Jewish calendar, there's 6,000 years total from the beginning of creation, or at least from the creation of Adam, because that's how we can work out the 6,000 years. By then, Adam lived 930 years. We know how old he was when he had his first child, or the child which, the third child actually, Seth, and we know how old he was when he had children, etc., etc. So we've got a very, very clear dates of all the different generations from Adam all the way down to today. And that's 5,784 years. We're not getting into the whole discussion about the age of the Earth. The scientists say it's 15.3 billion years. I'm not saying any pros or cons about that. There definitely seems to be a contradiction there. But there's many, many approaches, and that's not going to be the topic of today. I'm focusing purely on the prophecies aspect of these things. So that's the framework we're working with. We're working with the world starts with the year 0, that's creation, and finishes with the year 6,000. Adam was meant to be, well, he was created on the 6th day, and if he wouldn't have eaten from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that Friday would have been his test day, the day where he gets tested, and the next day, the Sabbath, the Shabbos, would have been the world to come. And so therefore the whole creation would have been very, very simple. Just 6 days of creation, Adam waking up after he has his soul given to him at midday on Friday. 6 hours he's got to survive, not eating from the tree, and obviously for very deep reasons, which we might address in its own video lecture another time. He decided, no, I have to rebel against God, I have to eat from the tree, and God converted each of those 6 days into 1,000 years. So instead of 6 days, we have 6,000 years now. And basically, we're taking that massive test of Adam, which you can think of as like a boulder or something. It's very hard to lift up a boulder, but if you smash it into tiny pebbles, then you can transfer the whole boulder from one place to the other through picking up one pebble at a time. And the idea is that each one of us, human beings, descendants of Adam, are actually doing his job, just we're doing a piecemeal part of his big job. And since it's broken up into lots of pieces, it's much easier for us to do it. But it just takes much longer, it's much harder. And also, as a result, because he sinned, he brought a new reality to the world of tangible evil as opposed to potential evil. We speak about this a lot in our Keystone lectures. Have a look, especially at the first lecture there, about the need for evil in the world, which is actually the highest form of good is having evil, paradoxically, but we explain it there, especially in the third Keystone lecture as well, about the reason why God does everything. Okay, so we're going to break this up into a few different lectures, and we're going to see how different ideas in the Torah, whether the direct prophecies, or today we're not going to speak about direct prophecies, but a rule which we can use to extrapolate pseudo prophecies from. We see how they are coming to fruition now. So we're looking at the current events. We could say they go back to the start of technology. Maybe that's where we'll start on. In the 1990s, we have the internet. We have suddenly this speeding up of technologies become extremely fast. The world in 1980 and the year 2000 are radically different, and the world's getting even faster. The changes are happening even more rapid now. Now speaking about putting microchips in people's minds instead of having like earpieces or Bluetooth, whatever. What other major things have happened? We've had COVID, right? We might talk about that. We have the idea of certain political movements and counter movements. We have the idea of populism as a fight, as a realignment of the political spectrum. Instead of right and left, conservative and liberal, we have a new paradigm now, which seems to be the populace against the autocrats, if you want to call them that, the government who gives a facade of being a democracy, but really what's happened now is we've got an oligarchy, which means a group of elites which are in charge of everything, and everyone has to follow through. But because of technical democracy, there's a place for the populace to have a say and try overthrowing them or whatever. That's the battle which we're seeing today. But then we're going to go into the final prophecies of the Messianic period, which we've already started. I think most rabbis and Torah scholars agree that now that it's pretty clear that we've started the Messianic process very clearly. I'm not going to make predictions, because you're not allowed to make predictions about certain dates. The Messiah is going to come by this date or something like that. But you can say things seem to be pointing that direction. But as we see in the book of Daniel, Daniel understood the prophecy. He misunderstood the prophecies. The prophecy said that after 70 years, this is after the destruction of the first temple, which happened about 2,500 years ago approximately. There was a prophecy which says that the destroyers of the temple, Nebuchadnezzar and the empire of Babylon, they would only last for 70 years. Amazing, a massive world power which conquered most of the known world at the time. Huge world power. And it just lasted 70 years and just overnight just got destroyed, taken over by the Persian Empire. We spoke about this in the lecture about the four souls of the Jewish people and the four exiles. So Daniel, he saw the prophecy, and the prophecy said after 70 years, the Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonian Empire will fall and the temple will be rebuilt. And he thought that this 70 years and that 70 years were the same 70 years. but it's actually the second 70 years actually was counted from a different starting point, which was quite a few years later. I think it was 11 or 18 years later or something like that. Can't remember off the top of my head. But what actually happened was Babylon was destroyed, and then Daniel was expecting, right, so why is the temple not being rebuilt? He didn't realize that's the end of Babylon, but the temple being rebuilt is 70 years after the end of the exile, because the exile actually took, it wasn't in 1 year. The exile took place over, so it was the first exile was Yoakim, the second one was Yoakim, third Sikiyahu rather. 17 or 18, I can't remember, either 11 or 18 years, I can't remember off the top of my head there. But anyway, so actually, if you count from the second date, when the exile actually was completed, then you start counting 70 years, and that's how long it will take for the second temple to be rebuilt. So you see that the two prophecies were offset, right? You had from the beginning of the rise of Babylon to the end of Babylon was 70 years, but then you have here it's not that bad. Then you have here, right? So instead of being 70 years between these 2 points like that, it has actually ended up being like this. So you had from here's the beginning of Babylon here, and the end of Babylon's there, but then the beginning of the full exile of the Jewish people from the destruction of the temple was here, and it ended up being a later date when they actually rebuilt the temple. But Daniel thought that these two things were measured from the same starting point. They were both from the beginning of the rise of Babylon. So people can make mistakes, and then we don't know exactly how the details of the prophecies are going to play out, and the dates, you can make inaccuracies and things like that, so I'm not making any predictions. However, I think it's important to realize that the prophecies are real prophecies. They're not just vague prophecies. These are prophecies with lots of details in them, and hopefully if we speak them out now, we can get the benefit of seeing the amazing playing out of these prophecies in real time, hopefully soon. Hopefully we survive them, because some of them are not very pleasant, but ultimately it's very good for the world, because everyone's going to be happy at the end. The question is, are we going to be ones? Are we going to be watching it from this world, or the people are going to be the ones who perish will be watching it from the next world, sort of looking down at this world? Either way, it's going to be the culmination of the purpose of creation, ultimately. Now, we know that these 6 days we spoke about, the 6 days of the creation, transformed into 6,000 years, which means that the end of the process has to be the year 6000, and we're in the year 5784 at the moment, which leaves us 216 years till the end of the process, till the beginning of Olam Haba, to the beginning of the world to come, which is the year 6000 to 7000. And then time changes, it becomes a different type of time. As we spoke about the dimensions of time lecture, we spoke a bit about it there. So you think, okay, fine, so Messiah, so the Messiah is meant to be there's actually 2 Messiahs. Messiah just means anointed one. I mean, it's a shorthand version which we refer to the final Messiah, the final anointed one, because all the kings of the Jewish people were anointed. The Messiah just means the king of the Jewish people, ultimately, who's meant to herald in this time of world peace and knowledge of God. That's what we're looking forward to. Now, there are many steps to this process, though, right? So that means it can't come in the year 5999. There won't be enough time to get everything done. In fact, it's brought down. I still haven't found the source inside. That's why I'm a bit uncomfortable about just quoting it, if I haven't seen it myself. But I'm basing it on reliable people. Ramendel Kessin, for example, who's a big, very knowledgeable scholar, a great rabbi of our generation. And he says that the whole process, I think it's based on the Zohar, which is a Kabbalistic part of the oral Torah, says that the process is meant to take 210 years, I believe. So that means 210 years for the Messiah to actually come, the Mechemes Gog and Magog, the final battle. But essentially the whole process of rectifying the world, which is the Messiah coming, rebuilding the third temple, the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment day, all that takes 210 years. So that means the latest it can start is the year 2030, which in the Hebrew dates would be 5,790, which is 210 years before the year 6,000. And that's only 6 years' time. So therefore, the Messiah has to have come, according to that calculation, in 6 years. There's another calculation which tells us that it's probably this year, because it says that the year after the Shemitah, Moitzoi Shemitah, the year after I'm not sure how you say it, there's a 7-year cycle which we keep every 7 years. We don't plough the land, things like that. And the chapter 25 in Leviticus, you can look it up there, all the laws there. So Moitzoi Shemitah is the year after Shemitah, and some people say it can even be 2 years after Shemitah, which is this year. That Mashiach actually comes, the Ben David comes. Ben David in the Talmud, the son of David, is a shorthand. It's a reference to the Messiah who comes from the Davidic Messiah. There's another Messiah which is meant to come first. That's the Mashiach ben Yosef, the one from descended from Joseph, or it could be from other tribes. I'm not getting into the technicalities. As with Judaism, things can be quite complex. But every time I say something, another thing in my mind, well, should I specify that? Should I explain that? Maybe expand on that? So I'm just going to try keeping it limited and controlled this lecture without going off, trying to give you the whole picture too much, because it'll just take too long. Okay. So it seems to be that the Messiah is coming this year, or at least in the next 6 years, and then we have to reinterpret what does it mean with the year after the Shemitah, but it seems to be happening now. Also, very interestingly, it says that the war of Armageddon is meant to start on Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the last day of the festival of Sukkot, and we know that October the 7th was on Simchas Torah, or Shmini Atzeres, is the day after Hoshana Rabbah, but in outside of the land of Israel, we actually keep the last day of Sukkot a day extra, so it actually coincided with that day where October the 7th attack started. So it seems like a sort of a big red flag there showing, something significant is happening on this day. And you can see the whole world's basically changed since October the 7th. So really the ball's rolling in a big way. It started rolling in a very big, significant way from October the 7th, which is a day where Mechemes Gog and Magog, the war of Armageddon, is meant to start. This war is meant to... We're going to speak hopefully in a bit of detail about the details of this war. It's prophesied in the book of Ezekiel, Zechariah, other books. Might not get through all of them, but we'll see some very interesting details in some of these books. And also we've got the prophecies which are mentioned in the Talmud, the Midrash, which are all part of the body of knowledge of the oral law which has been written down. That was approximately from about 2000 till about 1600 years ago. Okay, but today we're actually going to focus on another aspect, which is based on the idea of maaseh, avos, siman, levanim. The idea of the actions of the patriarchs is actually a sign for what will happen to their descendants. So we're going to have a quick look, just for people who don't know, for people who are familiar with the Jewish family tree. You can skip this bit, but for those who don't, it'd be useful to see this now. Okay, so over here we've got Abraham. So let's just focus on this part of the family tree here. So over here we've got, see, is that better? Okay, so we've got Abraham over here, and then we've got Isaac, and then we've got Jacob. These are the three patriarchs. And we see that Abraham, I don't know why they've written it like this. There you go, it even says Abraham over here. If you have a look at the family of Abraham, so I'm really not sure why. Who is this? I don't know where I got this picture of the family tree from. I just looked it up. Okay, so yeah, it'll do for now. Okay, so you've got Abraham married Sarah and Hagar. Sarah is the mother of Isaac, and Hagar was the mother of Yishmael. So Yishmael and Isaac. I'm going to use the Hebrew. I'll mention the English names once, and then I'll just go with the Hebrew ones because that's the ones I'm used to. So Abraham married Hagar. They had a son Yishmael, who's the Yishmaelim. There's the 12 tribes of Yishmael are descended from him, which is the Arab nation. Abraham married Sarah, having Yitzchak, Isaac. Then Isaac married Rebecca. Yeah, have you seen all this? Just check that you're seeing all this. Right. Right. So Isaac married Rebecca, Rivka, and they had two sons, Jacob and Esau, Jacob and Esau. And Esau is the ancestor of the Edomites, which ends up being the Roman Empire. And Yaakov, he ends up marrying several women, and from each of those women, there's a certain number of boys. And in total, you have 12 boys, which are the 12 tribes of the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. Yaakov's other name was Israel, so we're called the Israelites or the Bnei Yisrael, based on the name Yaakov, his other name called Yisrael or Israel. And that's the Jewish people. So we see the three different major, well, say Abrahamic religions, you could even say here. You've got the Judaism, you've got Islam coming from Yishmael, and Esav is the father of Rome, which of course is the inventor of the Christian religion. Okay, and also we know the dominant powers in the world. In the West is basically based on the Roman Empire. It still echoes throughout the generations, the ideals of the Greeks and the Romans. We spoke about this in the TaNaCh lecture. And the Yishmael is the Eastern world. It's a bit more complicated than that, because you do have other major nations in the East. But spiritually speaking, the spiritual archetype or paradigm of Yishmael, which is the Arab nation, that basically is associated with the Eastern part of the world. And right in the middle, you've got tiny little Israel, which represents the idea of the Jewish people. Okay, so let's have a think now. So what's going on with these three nations? So if we have a look at the stories of these nations, we see that what happened to these actual individual people reflects in the actual historical events of their descendants. So we've got a few examples of this idea of maaseh v'simna bonim. That if you imagine that the book of Genesis is sort of like a DNA code, or a historical DNA. That's a nice way of putting it. That anything which happened in the book of Genesis to the patriarchs and their interactions with other nations and things like that, that repeats itself later on. So, for example, Abraham had some guests, and the Talmud says that anything that Abraham did by himself, God did to the Jewish people later on, right? And anything which for example, Abraham ran to get the cattle to serve them meat to the three guests at the beginning of chapter 17, I think, in Genesis, the Parshas Vayera, the portion of the reading of the Vayera, the fourth of the portions in Bereshis, in Genesis. And God gave the manna directly to the Jewish people. He made it rain from the heaven, the manna, right, or the quail, the slov. But when it came to the water, Abraham didn't bring the water himself. He said, let there be taken for the guests some water. So he actually got someone else to bring the water. So the Jewish people in the wilderness, they got their manna directly from God. However, the water they didn't get directly from God. They got it from a rock. Yeah, Moses had to go and speak to the rock or hit the rock. And the rock is basically the source of the water as a messenger, so to speak, of God. Another example is where Jacob was well, we can bring it up to see what's going on here. Right, so if we move the thing over here. So if you have a look, there's a story in chapter 30, 31, 32, I think even, in Genesis, where Jacob gets married to the daughters of Lavan. However, Yaakov worked for Lavan for many years, and he had enough after a while because Lavan was a trickster. He kept lying about which daughter he was going to give to Yaakov as a wife. He ended up marrying the two sisters in the end, Rachel and Leah, and Bilhah and Zilpah, two maidservants as well. And through those four mothers, you have the Jewish people were born. But Yaakov said, I've had enough of this. He just keeps tricking me. Actually, Rachel and Leah told Yaakov, we've got to get out of here. So they escaped. They traveled 3 days. Lavan got news of it, and he chased after them. And on the seventh day, he reached them. So we have this story of Yaakov running away and escaping from Lavan. And this story is a precursor, is a maaseh of the actions of the patriarchs. Here would be the action of Yaakov escaping from Lavan. So the Jewish people in the book of Exodus is where you really see the parallels. Genesis and Exodus, you see a lot of the parallels happening there. The Jewish people now, not just Jacob, it's that the whole Jewish nation escapes from Egypt and travels for 3 days, and then the Paro finds out about it, and then he chases after them for 7 days. You see the parallel there. And again, the night before, Paro actually catches up, so that Lavan catches up with Yaakov. God appears to Lavan in a dream, and he says, you better not touch Yaakov, I'm protecting him, you don't touch him. What happens on the night before the seventh day of the Egyptians about to catch up with the Jewish people? Right? God protects the Jewish people. He puts a barrier in front of them. It makes it dark, so the Egyptians can't see where they're going, and they try shooting arrows at the Jewish people, and the clouds of glory absorb it and protect the Jewish people. So we see lots of parallels, and then the final salvation came the next day in terms of Lavan and Yaakov. Yaakov escaped finally. He negotiated with Lavan and they escaped. And when it comes to Paro, the famous story of the splitting of the Red Sea and the destruction of the Egyptian army. The miraculous story there, which is spoken out in Exodus chapter 14. Now, so how does this apply to us? What can we take from the book of Genesis and the stories which happen to the patriarchs and see how things play out in nowadays in terms of the precursor to the Messiah coming? So certain wars have to happen, certain battles are meant to be taking place, and at the end of it, God's going to reveal himself, and then everything's happy, right? But until then, it's going to get quite scary. But in order to not get too scared, if you're good, you'll probably be one of the ones to survive. So, as opposed to in this world where we see sometimes good people suffering, sometimes the bad people get away with it, that's only in order to facilitate free will. But if free will is effectively coming to an end soon, because once God's openly revealed in the whole world, there won't be much free will left. So God says, right, so now I can freely do the open miracles and not worry about that consideration of maintaining free will, just like we see. Again, maaseh v'siman bonim, the actions, the stories of our ancestors are a sign for what's happening with us. We have the idea of the Jewish people going out of Egypt as a precursor, as a template to how we are going to be saved now in the Messianic period. And we know that in the time of the Egyptian exile, we were stuck in Egypt, but God took the Jewish people out with complete open miracles where there was no room for free will anymore. Somehow still, Pharaoh still managed to rebel and say, well, I think we better still keep the Jewish people as our slaves, even though he had absolutely supernatural miracles wiping out the Egyptian nation one by one, blood, frogs, lice, wild animals, etc. Yeah, eventually God actually had to harden Pharaoh's heart. He had to take away Pharaoh's free will, or he had to re-give him free will. That's how it's explained. A very nice way of explaining it, because the miracles were so overwhelming that Pharaoh actually lost his free will. So God had to harden his heart in order to get back free will. And once he got back into equilibrium, he kept choosing the wrong choice again. So a nice way of understanding it, because otherwise you've got the problem, how can God punish Pharaoh with the last few plagues, the last 5 plagues, where he didn't have free will, because God was strengthening his heart? The answer is he was strengthening his heart in order to get free will, to reinstate his free will. Okay, so what happened there? There was open miracles. So therefore, we have the tradition that just like God showed miracles in the time of Egypt, going out of Egypt, the going out of the final exile which we're in now, it's called the Golus Edom. We had a lecture about this, about the 4 souls of the Jewish people and the 4 exiles. We're in the 4th one now, and it's paired together with Golus Yishmael, the exile of Yishmael, the Arab exile, which is literally happening now, I think. You can finally see this happening. And that's what we're going to speak about today. Okay, so that's the idea of the open miracles coming up soon. So therefore, people who do repent and who at least stay on the side of good, I expect, no promises, but according to my limited understanding about how God works, and to see the patterns which he teaches us in the Torah, it makes sense that God will actually protect the good people this time and only punish the bad people, because God doesn't need to hide anymore. So his justice can be straightforward. Okay, so what do we actually see in terms of the patriarchs? So we'll start off, we'll skip to the 2 later ones. Let's bring that up again. So we've got over here, we've got on the right side over here, we've got Jacob and Esau. Now these were actually twin brothers, and when their mother Rebecca was pregnant, they didn't have children for a long time, and they prayed. This is in the book of Genesis, around chapter 25, something like that. Might be a chapter off there. Jacob and Esau were in the mother's womb, and she was very confused, because whenever she passed through past a holy place like the study place of Shem and Ava, she felt the child, what she assumed was one child, wanted to get out. Oh, he's a holy child, he wants to learn Torah. But when she passed a place of idolatry, she also felt the child kicking to get out. So she was confused. Is this a holy child or an evil child, or maybe a schizophrenic child even, right? He doesn't know what he wants. And she was told that, no, basically you've got two nations in your womb. Once they're going to be two very great nations, and one of them is going to rule over the other one. This is a very, very fundamental idea now, that when one gets greater, the other one gets weaker, and when one gets weaker, the other one gets greater. And that's Esav and Yaakov. So basically you have this paradigm of the Jewish people and the Western world never have greatness at the same time. You'll either have the dominance of the Western society and the Jewish nation will be subjugated, which has kind of happened the last 2,000 years, or you have the subjugation of the Roman nation and the ascendance of the Jewish nation, which you had from the time of King David. King David until the destruction of the second, well, until halfway through the Second Temple, you have the golden age of Jewish history, when we had both temples, and the Roman Empire, the children of Edom at least, were very insignificant. And then you had, towards the end of the Second Temple period, the Jewish people were getting much weaker in their character, etc. And things started to break down. Eventually the destruction of the temple, but at the hands of the Romans, who were the descendants of Esav. So there you have the Jews going down and Esav going up. Right? I'd like to go through all the verses inside, but if you read through chapters 25 to 28 in Genesis, you'll see what's going on there. So we're going to touch on this idea now, this fight between Yaakov and Esav. As we said before, Yaakov was a spiritual one. Rebecca was told that she's got two children in her womb. One was going to be a righteous one. That's why he wanted to get out when he was passing the yeshiva. And the other one, Esav, when he was passing the idolatrous place, he had the desire for idolatry. So what's going on here? You got these two people, right? They both were very, very high spiritually. Even Esav, people don't realize that. Yaakov and Esav were very, very high spiritually. And they were actually meant to work together. Jacob was meant to have the safer job of just being Yoshev Ohalim. I'll bring up these verses, they're very relevant. Here we go, chapter 25 in Genesis. Let's skip to here. I'll put the Rashi on, just in case people want to see the Rashi. People could go to this Chabad.org library Bible. They've got the whole of the TaNaCh there with translation with Rashi. This is where I get my online Chumash here, my online Old Testament, if you want to put it like that. With Rashi's commentary, which is a very fundamental one. It really picks on the very, very important points of each verse. And we start the parasha, we start the portion of Toldos, which means generations. These are the generations. Oh, sorry, not this one. This one here. And these are the generations of Yitzchak, the son of Abraham. Abraham bore Yitzchak. You see here that the children struggling. And then she's told prophetically in verse 23, she'll have two great nations, and one nation will dominate the other one. V'rav yavod so'ir, and the greater one, the old one, will serve so'ir, the younger one. But it can also be read v'rav yaved so'ir, the greater one will be served by the younger one, right? And what does it say here? Here we go, yeah. So look at Rashi here, Mil'om Yamot. Lo yishvu b'gdura, they'll never be equal in greatness. Right? Kishazeh kom zeh nofel, like a seesaw. When one gets greater, the other one goes down. Right? It says in Ezekiel chapter 26, I will fill up the destruction. That means through the destruction of Jerusalem, I'll fill up the city of Tsur. So when Jerusalem became a weak city and a city where the temple was destroyed, then we see the rise and the ascendancy of Rome. Right, and we see the birth of the two children. The first one came out red, right? That represents that Esav was the warrior, the one interested in blood, right? The hunter we're going to see, and then the brother comes along called Yaakov, holding onto his heel, and they grew up. Vahi Esav ish yedei tzad ish sodeh, and Esav was a man of the field. He knew how to hunt. He was a man of the field. Yaakov ish tom yeshev ohelim, and Yaakov was a simple man dwelling in tents. Now the truth is, people think, oh, well, so Esav must have been the bad one. No, the thing is, this is not a bad thing. This is actually, God created Esav in this way, where he's meant to be a hunter. He's meant to be a person who dominates the physical world. He's the one who can create and control a society and the physical world and direct that to that physical world to be open to the spiritual input of the student, the Yoshev Olam, the one who sits in tents studying. That's Jacob. So Jacob and Esav have got this partnership. Yaakov is meant to be the one who brings the spirituality into the world. Esav is meant to be the one who fixes the physical world. So you've got a beautiful physical world. Just like you have a soul and a body. You can't have one without the other. Right? The unity of the two is the ultimate goal of creation. The soul and the body are meant to become one. The body is meant to go to the world to come with the soul, according to Jewish ideology, like we explained many times, especially in the Keystone lectures of the very first one, is in fact, about the need for evil. Unfortunately, and that's why it's actually brought down, most Jewish people don't even know this, at the root of the souls of Jacob and Esav, Esav was a higher soul. He was holier than Jacob, right? He was such a high soul because his job was to go into the place of more danger, the place of impurity, the place of physical temptation, and he was meant to subdue it. Whereas Yaakov had the slightly easier job. He was just meant to ignore, I'm not getting involved in the physical world, I'm just sitting here, I'm studying, involving myself with spirituality, connecting with God. And Esav, he's meant to prepare the world for me to bring in this spirituality, right? Esav's meant to support Jacob with his studies, right? So he doesn't have to worry about survival or anything like that. He could just focus purely on bringing goodness and spirituality and God's presence into the world, which brings blessing into the world. And Esav was meant to do the dangerous job of being the hunter, going out into the field where he's vulnerable to the temptations of the physical world. And unfortunately, he failed. In fact, he said, I just want this world. I'm not interested in the next world. Yeah. So they're fighting over these two worlds now. Jacob says, well, the spiritual world is the main one, right? And the physical one is meant to be, there to help the spiritual world. Esav, you're meant to be doing your job as well, right? But Esav said, no, I want your world as well. I want to enjoy this physical world, right? Not only do I want to enjoy the physical world, I want the spiritual world as well, because I know that spirituality is the life energy of the world. That's how I can enhance my physical pleasure, by having more spirituality. If a person's sort of like half in a coma, you can't enjoy very much. But someone who's vibrant with energy and life, which is spiritual, then you can enjoy the physical world much more. have a look at the lecture we gave about the holiness of eating. You might get a few insights to this idea there. Right, and Jacob says, excuse me, my job is to bring spirituality into the physical. You're meant to do the physical bit. I want to bring the spirituality into it, and you're not doing it. So what happened was, let's carry on this chapter. See, very important. This is a fundamental chapter for understanding human history, this. Right? Right? All these verses are relevant to today's lecture. It's amazing. Yitzchak, Isaac, loved Esau because his game was in his mouth, because he would hunt the animals and give them to Yitzchak. And Rivka heves Yaakov, and Rivka loves, it's a mistranslation here, because it should say ohavo, she loved. Here it says oheves, it's a present tense, she loves Yaakov. There's a whole discussion about why that is, because something which is spiritual is constant, right? If I'm speaking, you only have any awareness of me as long as I speak. So there's never any separation between my speech and me. As long as the speech is coming out, you see where the speech is coming from. However, if I make an object, yeah, you can see as I make it, you say, "Ooh, very impressive, Adam, you're very good at pottery or whatever, creating stuff." But if I go away, what happens to the object? The object remains. It's still there, and people can get cut off. Yeah. So he says Yitzchak loved Esau, right? That means it's a past tense. This is alluding to the idea when people create physical things, then it's history who made something. But someone who's making a speech, now you've got recordings of people making speeches, so it doesn't quite apply in the same way anymore. But when a person's speaking, you love the person as they're speaking. You're connecting with the person, because as soon as they stop speaking, as soon as the person stops speaking, the speech is not there where you can say, "Oh, okay, let's just focus on what he's produced now." No, the speech disappears as well. Okay. Just nice ideas I'm just randomly throwing in here. Right, so we got this battle. We've got this battle between Yaakov and Esav, right? Yaakov wants the spiritual, and he wants ideally Esav to do the physical part. Esav's not interested, right? So Yaakov feels that he has to take on the physical role as well. That's what we're going to see now. They come in from Rashi says from burying Abraham. The grandfather Abraham was just passed away, and Yaakov was making where is it here? Right, Yaakov was making some food to, Rashi says, does Rashi say? No, it doesn't say. Okay. And Esav came in, and he was doing some very bad. This is the day where Esav actually went, as I say, off the way. He went wayward. He became an evil person. His temptations got the better of him. He did some terrible things that day, right? And Esav said to Yaakov, "Just pull from this red thing here," right? Because the lentils were red. And he didn't even bother calling them lentils. Just, it's red. I just see the color red. Just pour it down my throat, right? That's why he was called Edom. Now we know where the name Edom comes from. Edom is the same word as Odom. Odom means red. And Edom is Edomite, which is the same letters as Adam, by the way. Okay. Another connection, another lecture to give on the connection between all those forms of the word Adam. And Yaakov said, "No. You want this redness, these red lentils so badly? Sell your birthright to me." Now, the birthright was basically the right to serve God. And basically, it's the idea of this Esav's job of subduing the physical world. And Esav said, "No, I'm going to die anyway. Yeah, my whole life is all to do with physical pleasures, and they have an end to them. So why do I need to have this job of spirituality. There's no hope for me. I'm the way I want to live my life. I just want to enjoy it and finish dead. Don't worry about the afterlife at all. My purpose. Yeah, yeah, you can have it. And Jacob said, make a vow, swear to me that this is the case. And he did. And that's how Jacob got the birthright. And we see later on, the whole story, I think it's the chapter after this. Yeah, 2 chapters later, chapter 27, we have the whole story about how Rivka saw that Isaac was going to give the blessings for the firstborn, and she was scared it would go to Esav, because Yitzchak didn't realize how bad Esav had become, because he was very tricky, right? And Yaakov, he had to go in pretending to be Esav, because Yitzchak was now blind. So Rivka told Yaakov, right, here we go. Yeah, verse 6, the whole story starts from verse 6, or verse 5 even. Rivka heard what was going on, and she then told Yaakov, I heard your father saying he's going to bring me food, bring me from your hunt to Esav, and I'll give you the blessing. But we know that if Esav, who wanted to abuse the blessings of the physical world for his own ends, he would end up actually destroying the whole system. And he'd get the physical world, and he will not use it to bring its purpose to fruition. Right. So Yaakov had to again be tricky and try getting the blessings this time, not just a firstborn birthright, which he's already got. But Yitzchak obviously didn't realize that, as Esav probably pretended that nothing had changed. So Rivka said, put some hair around your neck and on your arms, right? Right. So this is what Yaakov was afraid of. If he'd come in, Yitzchak would say, this isn't Esav, this is Yaakov. What are you doing trying to steal the blessing from your brother Esav? Right? So he said, no, don't worry. This is what you do. Here, I'll make the food for your father instead of the deer, which Esav's going to make. I'll make some goats. Goat meat tastes very similar to deer meat. So you bring some goat's meat in from my own personal allowance. She had a couple of goats each day as part of her marriage dowry. Very interesting there. And she took the clothes of her son Esav. It seems that Esav didn't trust his wives, so he the special clothing he had. I'm not going into what these clothes were. The special type of clothes which helped him hunt, attracted the animals, right? And she put them on Yaakov. So now Yaakov, when Yitzchak would feel Yaakov, right, he would feel the clothes of Esav, and then on top of that, she took some goat skins and put it on his hands and on his neck, the smoothness of his neck, because remember, Esav was very hairy. He was ruddy and hairy, right? And then she gave him the food, and he came into his father, and he said, "Are you here already?" Right? They said, "Yes, I am Esav, your firstborn. I've done what you told me. Come and eat from the food." And then Yitzchak was suspicious. That was quick. How do you manage to find to hunt something quickly? He was worried maybe he stole it or something. Because you see, Yitzchak wasn't 100% confident that Esav was good. I said, no. God helped me out, and He gave me the animal to be caught. He just popped up and I killed it very quickly. Right? I didn't have to go hunting very far. And Yitzchak said, come closer to me. I want to feel you, my son. Is this my son Esav or not? Because he really thought this is strange. Because Rashi points out that he mentioned God's name. Right? Yeah? Ki yikra Hashem lekecha lefonoi. Yeah? That the Hashem, how's it translated here? Had prepared it before me. Right? And Esav wasn't the type to mention God's name. So this is very suspect. So Yaakov came closer, as Rivka predicted, and he felt him. Because remember, he's blind, so he was trying to determine, is this Esav or is it Yaakov? Vayomer. Now this is a key phrase, very famous phrase here. And he said, Hakol kol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of Yaakov. Vayadayim yidei Esav, but the hands are the hands of Esav. Remember I told you before about some of the voice. That's Jacob. That's why Rivka loves Jacob, because he's the one with the voice. The voice is always connected to the person. So as long as the voice is around, the connection to that person is there. Whereas the Yadayim de Esav, the hands are the hands of Esav. When a person makes something, the product of the action can be detached from the person who makes it. So you see here clearly you see the two characteristics of Yaakov and Esav. Yaakov's all about the voice. Yeah, he's the one who says the words of Torah. He's the one who speaks, the power of speech. And Esav is the one with the power of action, of doing. In fact, the word Esav comes from the word oso, which means to make, to do. Literally, his name is to make. And he didn't recognize him because his hands had the hair on them, and he blessed him. And then the dramatic story, one of the most dramatic stories in the Torah, right? Then Yitzchak proceeds to give the blessings to Yaakov, and then just in time, as Yaakov was, just as he finished making the blessings to Yaakov, Esav ochiv bo mitzedai, and then Esav finally came in, just as Yaakov was going out, right? So sort of like mirrors, just as Esav is being born, just as Esav was exiting, Yaakov grabs onto his heels. Very interesting, sort of maybe parallel there, possibly. And then he gave the food to sing, and he said, "Come, father, stand up and eat. Right? I want your blessing." And Yitzchak said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm your firstborn, Esav." Then Yitzchak realized his mistake, and there's loads of different commentaries of what he was trembling about here, right? Who is this? I ate everything from that I wanted. Yitzchak wasn't so interested in the meat, right? Right? Yeah, he wasn't just interested in the meat. He wanted to have the mitzvah, the commandment of honoring your parents. He wanted, that's what gave the meat the flavors, the fact that his son had worked so hard to get it. They said, "But I don't understand. If it wasn't you, but I tasted in this meat some spirituality. I don't get it. How could it, who was it?" When Esav realized this, he cried out, "Bless me, please." And he said, "Sorry, your brother's come. Your brother's beaten you to it. He's got the blessing. I can't give a blessing to both of you." And then he was very, very upset about the whole thing. And yes, that's where the hatred of Esav against Yaakov started. So he gave him one final blessing. There's one blessing left I can give you. Right? Al Here we go. You will live on your sword, and you will serve your brother. However, when it will be that Torid, then you have a reason to have a protest against the fact that he got the blessings. That means Jacob's not keeping his end of the deal. Some scary words here. And you will throw his yoke off from your neck, and you will be in charge. And that is this is the precursor to the whole of the interactions between the Jews and the non-Jews throughout history here. When the Jewish people, they do God's will, then there's peace between them and the surrounding nations. When the Jewish people rebel, or they don't keep what on the level they're meant to be, that gives more strength to Esav specifically, but generally the non-Jewish nations. And you have the concept of anti-Semitism. That's where anti-Semitism comes from. It comes more when the Jewish people actually accepted the Torah, but all the other nations rejected the Torah, accepted the Jewish people. And then they said, well, you're only the chosen nation because you accepted the Torah. Why are you not keeping it? We're going to take that blessing from Isaac and we're going to use it now. You're not keeping the Torah, which this is the only reason why you have dominance over us, because your spiritual dominance over the physical is only because, it's an earned thing. It's not given. It's not a free pass. It's only because because you've got a job and God wants you to fulfill that job, that mission of bringing spirituality into the world. So therefore the physical world is going to be subjugated to the spiritual. However, when you rebel, you don't deserve that anymore. And God brilliantly makes this tool to get the Jewish people back on track, called anti-Semitism. That's why anti-Semitism is a good thing ultimately, right? I don't want to say this in the wrong way. Right? I'm not telling any non-Jews there to go hating Jews. On the contrary, try loving the Jews. We should all love each other. We should all be banding together to serve God. However, objectively speaking, there's a very important reason for anti-Semitism, and Isaac knew that. Isaac didn't randomly give these blessings. Isaac knew exactly what was going on here. Yeah, he knew that Jacob had a very important job, but if Jacob would mess up, you need something to push him back on. And that's the new job of Esav. The new job of Esav is not just making the physical world now, because now essentially Jacob's sort of usurped that job, and he's given over to his two sons, Yisachar and Zevulun. Yisachar is the one who studies, Zevulun is the one who involves himself. These are two of the 12 tribes. They meant to make a partnership together between the spiritual and the physical. Esav's job now is to make sure the Jewish people stay in line, right? And ultimately, Esav's meant to get his job back and bring the physical world to perfection. He's still got that job technically now. It's just we can't. Yaakov realized that you can't rely on Esav to do the job because he was just too attracted to the physical world, and that physical world is too corrupting for him. Like we see in Western society, that's the idea of the decadent, sort of hedonistic Western society which we have now. Remember, I'm not trying to generalize. I am trying to generalize, but I'm not speaking about individuals. Every individual has a choice. Are you going to be hedonistic? Are you going to go after the physical pleasures of the world? Or are you going to try transcending that and be good, trying making the world a better place? Everyone's got that job. Whether a person's a Jew, he's in the Western world, he's in the Eastern world, Islam, Christianity, Jewish, Arab, European, American, I guess that's what the Esav is, or Jewish. We've all got our jobs to do, and we can fail, we can pass each one. Everyone's got free will. But generally what's happening is that there is a tendency in the Western world to tend towards decadence, physicality. We want to enjoy this world, but not because we want to enjoy this world to thank God and to appreciate the amazing things He's given to us. We want God out the picture so we can indulge in the physical world without having any conscience, without having to worry about any accountability. We want to go to the lowest depths of depravity and enjoy ourselves and totally cut God out of the picture. That's the danger. Right. So when the Jewish people do start to do the right things, what you'll see is a shift in balance. You'll see a golden age of, let's say, America and Europe, and the Jewish people are in exile, they're trodden, they're persecuted. When the Jewish people start to shift and repent, I'm not going into exactly what that repentance is, it's actually a few specific things they have to repent on, because, well, until recently, the Jewish people were more or less keeping everything. There was just a couple of critical things they were getting wrong, which make everything bad, basically. But once they're fixing that, what's happening now is you're seeing the breakdown of Western society and the ascendance of the Jewish people, the unity of the Jewish people becoming stronger, which is a good thing for the world as a whole. So now you're going to get, that's why I think that's what's happening in America at the moment and in Europe. The whole society seems to be imploding very, very quickly. And we're going to see that that's partially to do with the Arabs, which is another spiritual element to add into this equation, which we'll speak about maybe in the next lecture. It's gone on quite a long time, this lecture so far. It's not the sort of structured lecture which I usually give. I'm just giving sort of this idea of whatever we see by the patriarchs, we see reflected with their descendants. So we see this battle between Jacob and Esau. We see the next verse, Vayistom Esav es Yaakov. Esav hated Jacob because of the blessing, right? And then we mentioned this actually in one of our lectures, I think the one about the 4 exiles. And Esav said in his heart, I can't wait till my father dies, and then I'll be able to kill my brother without upsetting my father, which is a very twisted take on the idea of honoring your father, right? It's very, very superficial. I can't do it because it's not the right thing, it's not the done thing. Remember the idea of the pig, the kosher signs are on the externals. He provides a facade of being an honorable, good person, creating a society who's look how kosher I am. Look at the Western society; it's so moral, such justice. We've got law and order. We've got social safety nets. We've got public health. At least in England, we have the NHS and things like that. We have a lovely functioning society, right? We have help people who can't afford it. We have things like benefits. We have roads. We have shops. We have institutions to better society, which is beautiful. It's exactly what's meant to be happening. This is the good Esav. This is Esav what he's meant to do. However, if you're not careful, you get the corruption which lies behind everything. Yeah, why they're really making such a nice physical? Are they doing it because they want a better society, or because they want to indulge? They want to be hedonistic. And you see, Western society, even Christianity, the religion tends towards atheism. Very interesting that. Yeah, you get a lot of atheism coming from the Christian sort of mindset. Yeah, because it's coming from Rome. It's the idea of like God's physical. That's how they look at God as part physical. He's with us. Bring God down to a physical level, right? There's no hope for us. Yeah, we have to have salvation, believe in Jesus and things like that in order to get their salvation. Why? Because they believe there's no hope for them. You know, we're fallen. Yeah. No hope. Once, as we know, a person who gives up hope, he does the worst things. So it's that mindset which is sort of like going backwards and forwards within that religion, and you see clearly the ideology of, at least I would say, at least the Protestants and the Reformation form of the church seem to tend towards atheism, like in England and in America, you've got a lot of that. In the Catholic countries, I don't know if you have so many atheists come from Catholics. Again, my speculation there, nothing, not based on anything, just my intuition there. Yeah, I could be completely wrong about that, so don't take that as gospel. Excuse the pun, right? Yeah. But you see, in the Arab world, you don't get that. You don't get the tendencies. Maybe it's because they're more authoritarian. Maybe they're just a few hundred years behind where the Christians are now. I don't know. Yeah. But anyway, leaving that aside, but the Western world is the one which tends towards physicality, because that's what their strength is. Their strength is building, making stuff. They make. Now, this is where we'll finish off. This is a beautiful idea, and we'll finish off today. So we had the battle between spirituality, the voice of Jacob, and the hands of Esau. That's a physical world. And what did Esau learn from the fact that Jacob got the blessings in the end? The voice beats action. Or you could even say the pen, writing words, is mightier than the sword. Yeah? The ability to influence people, to speak out ideas, abstract concepts, is more powerful than just physical might. So what do you do if you're in an Esau situation? Well, how are you going to get your strength back? You can't partner up with your enemy now, the Jews, Jacob, because that will be admitting defeat. So what are you going to do? Is there another nation which has the power of speech, the power of spirituality? Yes, there is. Now let's have a look at this. So this is where Jacob runs away to Lavan. Rivka tells him, yeah. Rivka finds out about the plans of Esau to kill Yaakov, and she says, run away, run to my brother Lavan, marry his daughters there, right? Right. And Rivka's not happy about the daughters of Ches, which Esav married. So look what happens now. So Esav's looking, he gets another blessing just before he goes. Verse 5. Yitzchak sent Yaakov to Padan Aram, to Lavan. And Esav saw, now look at this is very important. Look at the precision, the beautiful precision of these verses. Esav saw that Yitzchak blessed Yaakov. What does that mean? That Esav understood that the power of speech beats the power of action. And he sent it to Padan Aram to take from him a wife, right? And we know the idea of getting married. That's a way of bringing out your power in the world. If a person's got a certain power, a certain skill, the best way to bring it out is having a partner to help crystallize it and bring it into reality. Because men have got a tendency to have potential, but not to actualize it. They just want to play about with their power and not actually put it into anything useful. Whereas women are the ones who have got the skill more, maybe that's the way of putting it, have got this power to take something useful and make it real, not just a theoretical thing, right? Men like to be able to do everything, but they end up doing nothing, right? Whereas women, they could take something which has a lot of potential and say, right, forget about that. Try this, just do this, focus on it. Women are all about getting things done. Men are about the ideas, different ideas you can have. And women have got the strength to say, okay, take one of those, take one of them. I know it's painful to reject the other ones, but get them done. Like the story of the poor person who helped the king, and the king was very grateful, so he gave him 4 sticks, And he said, walk as far as you want. Put the one stick here, walk as far as you want, put the other 4 sticks down. Whatever is enclosed in these 4 sticks, that little piece of land is yours, by the decree of the king, as a thank you for this, for saving my life, or whatever the story was. And the poor person goes, and he said, well, I've walked about 10 miles already, a massive field I'm going to have. Wow, I'm going to be one of the richest people in the country. I said, but 1 minute, the king said anything. Well, let's go a bit further then. So he works another mile, he works 20 miles, 30 miles, right? And he never puts the other stick down because he keeps thinking, why stop here? I can always get more. That is the fallacy of male thinking. The idea of potential, but you're too scared to sacrifice some of that potential in order to lock in. I'm sure there's some sort of game show with that. Is that basically you got £4,000, 10,000, you got £500,000. Are you willing to look in? You can take away that £500,000, but if you keep playing, you get 2 million, but you risk losing everything. The male will say, no, I want to go further. I want to see if we get that million, and then he's lost everything. Whereas the female will say, 1 minute, £500,000, I think we'll keep that. But you're sacrificing £1.5 million potentially. Yeah, but I'm definitely getting 500,000. So it's to do with decision and game theory, right? Making choices. That's the difference between men and women. Okay. So let's go back to the verses here. Right, so he's going to Esav's thinking Yaakov's going to get a wife. He's going to be able to crystallize. He's going to bring out that power of whatever Yaakov is meant to represent to the world. The idea of spirituality, bringing God into the world. I need to fight against that. And I'm going to be at a disadvantage if he's married and I'm not married. So he said they sent him to marry a wife there. To take a wife from there. And we see that Yaakov listened to his father and his mother, and he was in danger of actually carrying out, and he's going to get married before him. So Esav thinks, what am I going to do? I have to get married, but I have to have this power which Yaakov has to battle him on his own level. I need the power of speech. So what does he do? Vayar Esav kiros b'niskan b'nei Yaakov Yitzchak v'Aviv. He sees that these wives were displeasing. His wives, which he already had, they weren't doing the job which he was hoping they would do. Vayelech Esav el Yishmael, and Esav went to Yishmael. Vayikach es machalas, right? And he took Machalas. Machalas is the daughter of Yishmael, right? That is the story. So what lesson can we take from here? So Esav, knowing that he was lacking the power of speech, he had the armies, he had the strength and the might, but against the spirituality of the Jewish people, they seem to be making a comeback. So what does he do? Partner up with Yishmael, because Yishmael means Yishmael, God will listen. That means that Yishmael has a power of spirituality, as we explained in another lecture. We're going to be going into this a bit more, hopefully. Yishmael has this power of connecting. Shmiya, I hear something. I don't Esav, I don't asur, I don't make things. I shomeh, I hear things which are spiritual, which are abstract. The Jewish people have both these powers. Maaseh, what do the Jewish people say when they agree to accept the Torah from Hashem at Sinai? God asked them, do you want to do the Torah? Maaseh v'nishma, the famous phrase of the Jewish people, the historic phrase. We will do and we will hear. We will do, that means we'll actually physically do the mitzvahs, the commandments. We'll make a difference in this world. Action. V'nishma, but we're also going to have that spiritual connection with God and bring God into our spirit, into our physical actions. That's a maaseh and Yishmael. Esav says, I've got to combat that. I've already got the asiyah, I've already got the actions, I've already got the yadayim day Esav, the hands, the warriors, living on the sword of Esav. But I need the power of speech out somehow. So I'm going to go to Yishmael, who's got this power of shmi, of hearing, of words, spirituality. So now what we're seeing in the world is a reflection of what's going on. This is the idea of today's lecture. You see in the world a very, very interesting phenomenon. Until relatively recently, the East and the West were more or less separate. Yeah, the Arabs trying to invade Europe, things like that, they were driven out. The Crusades trying to go into the Eastern world. They're also more or less the Arab world and the Western world, the Holy Roman Empire, the also in one part of the world you have the Arabian, the Muslim world on the other half. Pretty well defined, right? And there was small skirmishes backwards and forwards, wars backwards and forwards, but in the end, Europe is mainly a Christian set of countries, where you have like the Arabian countries and the east of Israel, sort of part of the world. That's where all the Arabs live, and also in the south as well. In the North Africa, also the Arabs remained there. So you have it clearly delineated between these two religions, Christianity and Islam. But Esav is losing power now, because for whatever reason, we're not going into it, the Jewish people are repenting now. They have been for a few decades now. So that this has been building up slowly, but it's coming much quicker recently. So more Jewish people are living in Israel now. So the original land, Eretz Yisrael, is getting stronger with its children, the Jewish people coming back in now. That's a sign that there's an ascendancy of the Jewish people, but at the same time, that has to entail a decay of the Western world. So what's happening? We see that the institutions of the West is breaking down. It's getting overrun with migrants. You've got this inflation going on. You had the COVID pandemic. It seems that the Western world is breaking down. It's becoming untenable. You have the very well-meaning climate protesters. Yeah, they're very good at heart. They care about the world. It's very admirable. However, it's unbalanced. People say, okay, so we shut down the farms. Shut down the farms because they're producing too much nitrogen. No more cows. But 1 minute, humans need food to eat. If you do things too drastically, you're destroying the agricultural sector of Europe and the Western world, right? So food prices are going to shoot up. We had the trucker protests in France and in Holland. Yeah, you had supermarkets which didn't have food for a few days and things like that. People realizing food's not a given. Yeah, we're very lucky. Our supermarkets are usually stocked with all sorts of foods, with amazingly abundant life we live, with all sorts of foods which even the royalty of earlier centuries couldn't even dream of. But can't take it for granted. There's a breakdown. Inflation's going very high, right? People can't afford things. Recession. So we see a breakdown in the Western society. What does Esav need to do then? He needs to partner up with Yishmael. He needs to bribe Yishmael, the Arabs. That's the idea of historically going to the Arabs for oil. They used to be the ones who had all the oil in order to make the Western society function. But what's happening now is you've got Esav doesn't have the power to fight anymore against the Jews for whatever reason. I'm not sure myself. It just seems to be the case. However, with the power of Yishmael, the Arabs, they've got the power of the voice. They're very, very persuasive, and they know how to I've got to be very careful how I say this. I don't want to come off as propaganda. That's the idea of propaganda. Propaganda is the ability to lie and to get people on your side through lies. Because Yishmael, remember, they don't have the physical power which Esav has. So one of the Jewish people should be okay against the Arabs, because the Arabs are just empty threats, but they don't have any physical, well, they do have physical missiles and stuff like that to back them up, but it's obviously not good enough. And Esav, the Western world is not interested in attacking the Jewish people, right? But when Esav went and he married the daughter of Yishmael, that's a binding, that's a new alliance between Esav and Yishmael, the doers and the speakers. So now you've got this very interesting new paradigm of the Western world and the Arabs basically convincing the Western world to physically arm against the Jewish people. So we see the reflection of all the stories which happen in Genesis. These are happening in real time now. You're seeing that many of them, a lot of the people protesting against the Israeli war against the Hamas and the other terrorists, Hezbollah and things like that, is a lot of leftist white liberals. Where they're getting it from. And you have people who are totally incompatible with Islamic ideology. They wouldn't survive 2 minutes in a hardline Islamic country like in Gaza. They just get killed with the LGBT, all that business. They wouldn't survive there. What do they think they're doing? So spiritually, this is what's going on. Esav's giving up part of its autonomy or its power in order to make an alliance with Yishmael. And using the power of speech of Yishmael, Yishmael can now help get Esav interested in fighting against the Jewish people. So it's very interesting. So, for example, part of Esav is Russia. We've got Russia, Europe, and America are three places where Christianity basically went to in a major way. And they're basically Caucasian sort of, Roman sort of type regions, put it like that, simply. Even though technically they're not descended from them, but spiritually they're that mentality, the idea of the Western world, that's Russia, Europe, and America, all with their own special characteristics, but essentially the idea of Esav, of creating society, building up society, what we call the first world countries. That's a good way of putting it. So the Arabs clearly have got Russia on board, right? And they're working on America now. I think Europe's pretty much sort of split, but you've got very strong anti-Israel. I've got to be careful not to conflate Israel with Jewish identity, because they're two different ideas. Because the state of Israel is really more of a secular state, and the Jewish people are Torah based on ideology rather than the land, even though the land is part of the ideology, but it's not the foundation of it. It's not meant to replace the Torah, it's meant to be part of the Torah. Secondary to the Torah is the land of Israel, whereas the secular Zionists say, no, the land is everything, the Torah is nothing. But from the point of view of Esav, whether it's the state of Israel or the Jewish people in terms of the Torah, both of them are things which they have this desire to subjugate and to fight against. As we explained, that's all part of Isaac's blessing to Esav. When the Jewish people do the wrong thing, you fight against them, right? However, now Esav wants to fight against the Jews, but it's seeing it's not succeeding anymore because the Jewish people are ascending. So it takes Yishmael, and it uses the propaganda, the power of speech of Yishmael, with the force, the might of Esav, the sword of Esav, and those two combined together are now fighting against the Jewish people. And now this is the big clash which is about to happen. It's already started. You've got the mixing of these two nations together. However, remember, this is like a marriage of convenience. Yeah? The Islamic way of thinking, the Arab way of thinking, is completely opposite of the Western way of thinking. The only reason they're partnering up is because of the hatred of the Jews. Now, remember, I'm not talking about everyone. I'm talking about the political forces, the political alignment between them. Individuals always have free will. Yeah, that's why in America, in Arab countries, you have people who are pro-Israel, some pro-Arab as well. Even the Arab countries, you've got many outspoken people saying that Israel is justified in attacking Gaza to defend themselves from Hamas. Even the son of one of the founders of Hamas is speaking up very pro-Israel because he knows that the evil of Hamas and what they're trying to do. They said they're not going to stop, but with Israel, they want to take over the whole world, like they're commanded to in the Quran, to make the whole world under God, which the Jewish people also believe in, but not by force. We believe we do it by being good people and being an example to others, whereas Islam believes in, if they can't do it that way, then we just force everyone to convert anyway. Right. So Esav and Yishmael partnering up now to fight against the Jews, right? Yeah, you got good, as we said, we got good people in Esav as well. A lot of people who are pro-Israel in England and in America, right? And we're going to see that it's meant to be like that. And this is where the big Armageddon thing comes in, which we'll speak about in one of the upcoming videos. We've already gone way over than I thought. I thought it was going to be a 15-minute one, this one. But because we went through all the different verses and everything, just to give you the whole background. So just think about, look over those verses again, those chapters, read through them, look at that marriage of Esav to Yishmael's daughter in the end, and you see this is what's happening now. You've got the combination of the physical might of the Western world and the power of speech and the convincing speech and propaganda ultimately of the Arab world, which are very, very skilled at getting people on their side. As we know, rewriting history and things like that, reframing things in a way which makes incredibly, the Jewish people who just got one of the worst attacks on them in decades are suddenly they're the perpetrators for trying to stop themselves being killed the whole time. How dare you stop yourself being killed and defending yourself? Ceasefire. You've got to stop fighting, yeah? Let the Hamas kill you. That's essentially what's going on. How do you end up with something like that? It's only for the immense skill and the slyness, and it's a positive thing as well of the Arabs, the power of speech, the power of convincing, just using it for the wrong reasons. That's all. Right? Again, a lot of the stuff I said here is my take on just looking at the Torah, looking at the stories and interpreting them, well, the way I see the political world going at the moment. I don't claim to be a prophet or anything like that. I don't even claim to be correct in what I'm saying here. I'm just saying, giving you food for thought, and if you see the truth in what I'm saying, then you'll see some much more convincing stuff in the following prophecies, where the prophecies are much clearer and they actually got much more details. But here I'm showing you this paradigm of looking in the book of Genesis, looking at the interactions between Jacob and Esav, Jacob and Esav and Isaac, and then Esav and Yishmael, Isaac and Yishmael, the way Abraham treats Isaac and Yishmael. We might speak about that as well. All different parts of the family interacting with each other, and we see that's how these different nations, these different paradigmatic parts of the world are interacting with each other. And at the moment, we've got the marriage of Esav to the daughter of Yishmael. That's the marriage of the Western world to the Arab world. And we're going to see, I think, this is going to be the start of the Western world attacking Israel, which we're going to see. This is part of the prophecies in the book of Ezekiel. Again, I'm not 100% sure because there's other sources to take into account, but hopefully we'll go through them and we'll see what you think. Okay, very controversial this. If you argue with anything I say here, I'm willing to listen and even go back on what I've said here, because again, this is not something based purely on I've studied this, I've understood it very clearly. This is just my take of building up different ideas and trying to interpret what's going on in the world now. So feel free to leave comments if you don't agree with what I'm saying. Some of the stuff I said here is hard and fast. It is very clear in the words of the Torah. Some of the stuff is just interpretation, how to interpret that in the world now. Okay, so I hope that's a good start for the understanding current events. And and we'll hopefully carry on this series another time. Thanks for listening. All the best. Bye for now.